Austin Simmons may have dominated the news, but he isn't the top storyline going into fall camp.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Steven Willis, and we'll bring in Dalen Flowers from the Rebel Walk in just a second to get his thoughts on fall camp that is just a week away. Thank you, though, for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and please give us a like, subscribe, and comment on your way out. It's completely free, but it helps the show out and allows us to keep it free for you. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. So we're going to bring in Dalen Flowers. And Dalen, one thing's for sure. Austin Simmons 6 months ago would have been the number one storyline going into fall camp. But there are two or three things right now that's probably more important, and that's because he just kind of took it over. Until the first game, you don't really know what it's going to be, but it's not really a question mark. What are the main question marks going into fall camp?
It's a good question, man. I think there are a few. I think for a lot of outside fans, I think the secondary for this Ole Miss defense is one of the big question marks. I think a lot of talent, went on to the NFL on the defensive side of the ball, and the pass defense did have its questionable moments last year. So a lot of those moves to the NFL, a few transfer portal guys as well. I think a lot of fans have questions about what the secondary is going to look like. Is there enough size? Is there enough SEC experience in the secondary? Can they play the way Pete Golding wants to be able to kind of attack with a front three or a front four and allow the safeties to sometimes have that man coverage or the corners to have that man coverage, which would allow them to be put in one-on-one situations, but can they be successful in those moments? So I think that's a really big question mark. I think another big question mark is the run game for Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin talked about it and was asked about it throughout SEC media days. That's been the poise of his offense over this time at Ole Miss. Can that run game be sustainable to open up the play action pass and the RPO for their offense? It wasn't sustainable last year. Lane Kiffin talked about that during the SEC media days. How can the run game get back going with Logan Diggs finally healthy and a few new pieces from the high school and transfer portals? Can this Ole Miss running game find some features that allows Austin Simmons to be successful in doing what he does? And I think one more big question is who's going to take over in that offensive line. A lot of injuries last year and some new faces and some guys that are coming back as well. I think we got some parts figured out, but I think some fans may still be trying to figure out who may be a left tackle. Can Bryson Sanders be a good center? Where is Jayden Williams going to fit now that he's back and Diego Pounds is still here? I think those are some question marks that John Garrison and the offense also have to kind of open, because that offensive line has to do their job this year, and you want them to be healthy. And if they're able to contain it and be compatible within the offense, I think there's no stopping this Ole Miss offense. But those are definitely going to be some of the question marks getting ready to go into fall camp in the 2025 season for Ole Miss.
Okay, let's dig into those three questions real quick and over the course of this podcast. And we'll start off with the secondary. Mm-hmm. Famously, Trey Washington and Saunders and Trey Washington were underrated important to last year's defense.
Absolutely.
And replacing them are going to be a major, major thing. Whenever they had problems in the spring, Lane Kiffin was not shy about the problems he was having in the secondary. And the way that Ole Miss attacked the summer transfer portal window to go after defensive backs, I think Jayden Williams and Sage Ryan end up going back there. TJ Banks is somebody that would be favored for that John Saunders type role. But I think personally, safety is a massive, massive question going into fall camp.
It definitely is. And I'll give you a little insight. They were rotating guys a lot throughout the spring practices, and we'll obviously get a little bit more confirmation going into the fall camps this year to kind of figure out who exactly Pete Golding is going to be feeling like it deserves that spot out there in the secondary. It was something that, I think a lot of Ole Miss fans had questions about last year. A lot of movement in that position kind of due to injuries as well. And later parts of the season, some guys that were kind of new in that secondary position, that safety position, kind of struggled at times. But that's definitely one of my biggest things as well. well, we have guys that I think could play there, but if you look at them, they don't have much experience in the safety position, or they're kind of newly vetted into what the Pete Golding system kind of looks like for a safety, and things like they're undersized to play in the SEC at sometimes. And, how is that going to be able to vault against guys that are, coming up against them that are a lot bigger? So I think that, the rotation is going to be fine. I think I have trust in Pete Golding to understand what is going to be the best accessible point to put someone in safety and allow this Ole Miss defense to be as successful as possible in the pass defense. But that definitely is something that has not been figured out yet from my point of view. I think that, it may remain a mystery until week one, and that Ole Miss may not even kind of put that out there, and we may not know until the game starts for week one against Georgia State. So that's a great question. I think there are definitely moving valuables in that position, and I think someone needs to step up to really prove they're the guy and can contain that position for Ole Miss this year.
Yeah, because it is an absolute landmine for this season if it is a problem. At what point, I wonder if it just doesn't work out. Let's say Sage Ryan doesn't pick up the defense as much as you would hope, and Jayden Williams has trouble adjusting from Louisiana Monroe and the Sun Belt to the SEC. At what point do you think that Pete Golding and Lane Kiffin makes the move to the kids, Keon Young, Cortez Thomas, LaDarian Clardy? Yeah. Is it a quick trigger, or do you kind of let Jayden Williams and Sage Ryan figure it out?
That's a good question, man. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a quick trigger. I think with the schedule this year and the placement of the quarterbacks that this Ole Miss defense is going to face this year, in terms of, every single team from now Tulane with their new transfer quarterback on into Oxford coming this year, and, Taylor Green, DJ Lagway, all these guys, Lenore Sellers, Garrett Nussmeyer. I think they're going to want to figure out really quickly who should be out there, because it gives them a little bit more comfortability and focus on what they need to work on in terms of how to prepare for the next quarterback for that week and the weeks going forward. I think that's going to be a quick trigger for the coaching staff. I think they want to kind of assess very quickly what they have so they can work specifically on certain things, or maybe specific guys, and allow those other guys to continue to work and get better to maybe fill that role if needed. But I think this Ole Miss defense and Pete Golding and his staff, Wes Neighbors and those guys out there, really want to be able to do something quickly to kind of officially put their roster out and put guys in starter positions to know they have something comfortable out there.
All right, when we come back, we will move over to the offensive side of the ball. We will attack the running back question and where Ole Miss is going from there right after this. Ever wish managing money felt a little bit easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're into growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It is like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. The first thing I noticed after I joined Monarch Money was how much money I was wasting eating out and having food delivered. Thanks to Monarch Money, I was able to clean that up quite a bit. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for $50 off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for half off your first year. Now, the really interesting thing that we're going to get into is the running back position, because Dalen, I think last year Ole Miss, after Quinshon Judkins, they panicked.
Yeah.
And they started taking absolutely everybody. Domonique Thomas, Rashad Amos, Henry Parrish, whoever could be the starting guy. They overspent on Ulysses Bentley to try and get him back. They were trying to find the right piece because they knew that they had everything else. They just needed something they could count on in the running game. Logan Diggs was part of that signing class that came over, but that was right after an ACL injury in the ReliaQuest Bowl for LSU. So he was out. An ACL is pretty famously an 18-month injury. You can come back quicker than that, but before you're normal and everything's good, It's about 18 months. I think this year the running back room is much more thoughtfully put together than it was a year ago.
1,000%. I think that, the return of Logan Diggs is important for Ole Miss. I think that he provides a lot of valuable assets for this team. If Ole Miss fans aren't familiar with him, he played at LSU and Notre Dame with Brian Kelly. If you want to go back and watch that 2023 high-powered offense Ole Miss LSU game, he played in that game, scored a touchdown. He can really move for his size. A really good size quarter running back, can move really well. Really has great agility. Can catch the ball in the backfield really well as well. And one of my favorite things about him is, well, he can pass block really well. I think that's something important for to have versatility in your running back room, a running back that can pass block really well. I'm excited about Logan Diggs. Lane Kiffin mentioned him a lot in the spring practice, and he looked really good, was moving really well. Obviously still has that brace on his knee, but he was moving really, really well with it on, and seems healthy. Seems like he put a few pounds on as well, but was moving really, really well throughout the spring practices. And I think with this guy, in the red zone, which is something that Ole Miss struggled in last year, was in red zone offense. You give him the ball, he puts his head down. I think you have a really obtainable chance to score 6 points with him in the backfield. So super, super excited about Logan Diggs. And you mentioned the other pieces. I think that the versatility of guys like Kwan Lacy and, Domonique Thomas coming back as well. I think those guys are going to be very valuable assets as well and have different roles within the running back room. But I think if Ole Miss assesses things a little stronger than they did at this point last year, then I think the running back room will be back to what the Lane Kiffin offense has it to be. But, obviously we're not going to see that until week 1. But I think there was a lot more focus on subsidizing what the running back room looked like to focus exactly on what the running game should look like for this Ole Miss offense.
Yeah, you mentioned Kwan Lacy. He was kind of the star of spring as far as
Yeah.
social media goes. You saw excellent contact balance. You saw a player that has all of the tools necessary, and this staff really liked him coming out of high school. He just ended up in Missouri for what reason or another. Now, Kwan Lacy's contact balance and everything that's going on, and they talked about him on Twitter, like random people that claimed to work for the football program that said he was going to be a star. I think Kwan Lacy is going to be very good, but it's nice to have somebody like Logan Diggs in front of him so Kwan Lacy doesn't have to come in and be the guy.
Yeah, that's correct, man. I think Kwan Lacy has all the tangibles to be a superstar one day, but I think, it's really important for these young guys to come in, understand the offense, learn the offense, sit behind a guy that's been through the trenches, which Logan Diggs has been, and understand what's kind of the landscape of what the college football capabilities are. I think Logan Diggs has the potential to do really good things on the field, and Kwan Lacy can learn some things by just sitting out there and watching. But you're going to see Kwan Lacy throughout the season as well. He has the tangibles to do a lot of great things and make some big plays happen for this team. But I think that there are moments where, sometimes he tries to do too much and it allows him to, kind of push the offense back, which I watched him do sometimes in Missouri and in high school a little bit. But he has the potential and the capabilities of being a superstar type running back. But I think it is important to have Logan Diggs, Domonique Thomas in front of him to understand what the totality of a full season is going to look like here at Ole Miss for him.
Yeah, I do not think that Domonique Thomas is going to be in the top 3 of the depth chart. I think Damian Taylor, the running back that transferred from Troy, is going to be there. And don't underestimate Shekai Mills-Knight and what he can be to this team. If he picks up the offense and what's going on, he is built like a player that will play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, man. Shekai has, again, superstar qualities. And I think, within the offense, he can do a lot of different things that kind of shakes up the defense for whoever's playing against Ole Miss. And he gives the Ole Miss offense a little bit of, things that maybe the opposing defenses haven't seen. You can't really prepare for Shekai Mills-Knight. And I think that's something that's great about him, that he can do so many different things. You don't really know how to watch film or prepare for him to do what he's going to do on the field. He moves really well. He can turn his body and get upfield really quickly. I think he has the capabilities of, putting up some really big numbers in his future. I think the totality of this running back room is really good as well. There are guys that, if those injuries come about, you have the availability to put somebody else out there. They can do some things better and maybe do the same things, even, kind of evenly as well. I think that, Kevin Smith had a lot of pressure put on him after this past season. And I think that, he understood that and he went out there and kind of, divulged to see what was out there in the portal and the high school rankings. And they recruited really well in both aspects. And, it's all going to be put on the field to see what kind of changes were actually made throughout the offseason. But it's going to be something that I think Ole Miss fans have to be excited for, because last year you kind of feel like that offense struggled because it didn't have a successful run game at all.
Yeah, that was the Achilles heel that eventually cost them the playoff because they went for it on fourth down against Kentucky, LSU, and Florida and did not make it because they didn't have a back that could actually make it. All right, when we come back, one more try with Dalen Flowers. We will talk about the offensive line and dig into that a little bit as we talk storylines going into fall camp. All right, so let's change gears because the running game was a problem. It was a two-pronged problem. We talked about the running back position in 2024, and it was my opinion going into this season in 2024, going into that season, I should say, that the offensive line was too big. They were too obsessed with bulk, and they were going to find big players. And with Ole Miss running a tempo scheme, running a zone scheme that requires a lot of athleticism in the offensive line, eventually they just wore down a little bit. I think personally, and this is just my opinion, they're going to be much smaller across the front, even though it's the same players coming across the front.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, man. I think that something is going to be, changed a lot throughout the offensive line. I think the re-addition of Jayden Williams finally, after he's getting back healthy, is going to be huge for this team. A guy that came in as a freshman and really started a lot of his freshman games, his freshman year here at Ole Miss. He's not the biggest offensive line, but he moves really well. He has great feet work. It was really pivotal for Ole Miss his first year and his sophomore year before he kind of got hurt in that Georgia game. I'm excited to see what Bryson Sanders is going to do in the center spot. I think his recruitment was really strong for John Garrison a couple years ago. He sat behind and learned behind previous guys that have been here at Ole Miss, and I think he's ready to take the reins and kind of move the offense within the way Austin Simmons wants to. I think that moving really well is going to be huge for this offensive line and understanding that you have to be able to obtain to adjustments. And I think this offensive line with this size is going to be able to do that. But, a lot of these guys also need some game experience. I think that you're going to move some pieces on those interior offensive line positions. You may see, Patrick Kuda's out there. You may see Hershey Lewis. You may see a few different guys. But I think, you make a great point. I think the size difference is going to be huge. I think Diego Pounds is still going to be out there. And sometimes, size is good. And I think he has the opportunity to do something really good this year. And I think there's a great versatility within the offensive line that they put together this year. They can, really make or break this offense. And you just hope that they do their due diligence and take care of Austin Simmons.
Yeah, I think it was Billy Embody over at On 3 talking about the offensive line. Listen, I don't know where he got it from. I know he was, teammates with Randall Joyner, but I digress on that. He mentioned a tackle situation with Diego Pounds playing on the left side, Jayden Williams on the right side, Devin Harper working outside as well. And then there's Therese Davis, the transfer from Missouri, from DeMatha Catholic out there in Maryland. The tackle positions feels like it's kind of where they want it to be, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that there were so many injuries happening on the offensive line, especially on those outside tackle positions last year, that Ole Miss kind of didn't have a plan B for when those injuries happened. And you saw it happen when those guys went down on the outside, offensive line, that Ole Miss didn't know how to recover. They didn't know how to regroup and put together some new pieces that were sustainable. But I think that also comes with practicing those moments. Sometimes, putting a guy that's usually left tackle at the right tackle position in practice is going to be important for game experience, for game time movement. You don't know what's going to happen nowadays. And sometimes, even if it's not an injury, sometimes one guy may not be playing good enough on the outside position. You gotta replace him. But I think Ole Miss really, really looked hard at what went on in the run/offensive line game last year and even the year before, and took notice of how they're going to be able to be successful due to past things that Lane Kiffin has done here and at previous schools. And I think they really wanted to divert what they've been able to do in previous places into this offensive line this year. You're going to see a lot of different things. You're going to see a lot of different movements, and you're going to see some things that may not be in the ordinary, but can really be sustainable for what Austin Simmons does really good.
So what do you got going on at the Rebel Walk and on the Dalen Show?
Oh man, just trying to figure out some record this week. Got a lot of travel going on this week, so it may not end up happening. But we got basketball, press conference here tomorrow with Chris Beard. So get a chance to go talk to him and see what's up with the basketball team. Getting ready for obviously fall practice here coming up as well for the Rebel Walk. So I'm super excited about that, but really a good time. This is a time that, the eagerness for everything just kind of starts building up, and super excited that, just in, a little over a month, football season will be here, and, all the Oxford fannies will be growing on the Grove and stuff. So really, really fun time for myself right now, man.
Should be a lot. Thank you for coming by today, and we'll talk to you next week, buddy.
Appreciate you, man. Hotty toddy, y'all. Stay safe.